Corn and soybean yields in the United States going up, according to the USDA. Here to discuss this, that is again Jerry Gidel, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. If you are new, make sure you subscribe. Thank you. So, Jerry, we have higher yields. Some people have expected that already, some not. How do you assess?
Well, today's performance, basically the numbers that were bandied around in the trade average guesses really wasn't all that much different than what the world was expecting here today versus the USDA's September crop report that was out today. And so in kind of a general point of view, it wasn't bearish, as we've already broken quite a ways, and we're down at some interesting support zones. So the market's kind of short covered later in today's session as they're going into the weekend. But we're still going to be worried about weather, and we're still going to be worried about what's going on in the Gulf of US on exports, and probably maybe get some yield ideas as we go forward.
But don't you think that for the long term there is bearishness?
Well, the bearishness is interesting in the point of view of that the carryover stocks inched up a little bit, but I wouldn't say that they're outrageously outrageously high and immediately need to be down. I think it still depends on what our final yields are going to be in the U.S. I realize that we did have a slight increase this month from the USDA. Last year, I think we went down to a couple bushels, but then we continue to go on down the rest of the year. So that the size of the U.S. crop is still going to make quite an important factor on where the prices might be the rest of this fall and on into early 2022. But you're right, other places in the world are expecting bigger crops on a longer term basis.
Yes, and what did you think about their estimates on the South American crops?
Well, you've kind of heard my point of view that I thought we were going to be a lot closer to ag-rural's estimate of 82 million. USDA only took it down 1 million. I guess even yesterday, ConnEd was very conservative about what they thought the size of the crop was. I think they were at 86, maybe down 1.5 million from what they previously put out. I guess the twist of it all is that Brazil at this point, the amount of corn that's been exported, the trend that we're seeing on shipments and also lineups of boats and things like that is really short versus the past few years. Now I realize that things can change as we get more attitudes here about what the crop size is, but most of the people that have already harvested this crop, and so they feel like they're not interested in selling at these prices, so that might make a difference too.
Yeah, and I have seen a report from Reuters about the use of feed meal, and China has announced that they are going to use less corn as feed meal. Do you think that means that they are going to increase again the use of wheat for that purpose?
Well, they've been very aggressive utilizing feed wheat and sorghum, stuff like that. At this point, they have not bought the amount of sorghum that they did last year, like they've done on corn previously at this point. So maybe they're going to look at sorghum again. And that the interesting twist on it is that they talked about utilizing less feed corn, and even the USDA increased their production estimates for China today by up to 73 million. I think that's up 4 to 5 million metric tons from their USDA's previous estimate because of the crops. Because last year, kind of remember here, we had quite an end of the season here with some pretty couple hurricanes or typhoons, and that, and weather along the way, and that. So there's a possibility of better crops. The twist of it is that China, they made their announcement here. I think it was yesterday or this recently, at least, and that at the same time when they talked about not utilizing their feed corn as much, they actually raised their imports on corn to the USDA's number of 26 million metric tons. So I don't know. I guess they finally figured out that the amount of stuff they bought and what they plan on buying yet is going to be closer to 26. I think there were 22 before, but there's so many numbers around the world anymore. I sometimes don't always remember each one.
Yes, and what are you expecting for next week?
Well, I think the corn side of things here is probably continues to be an important feature in this thing. We'll start to get a little bit of better handle on what our export capabilities are. This week's situation on corn, we continued to, well, a week ago we thought that it was going to be less than 3 or 4 weeks that they initially thought. This week we've kind of slowed things down, and looks like it's going to be attitudes that maybe we'll get things rolling on more than half of the facilities here by the middle latter part of next week. And that's definitely going to be a positive here on shipments, because even if Brazil has less corn to push into the world markets, and that the U.S. has got to be there to be part of it. Because there's one quick thing in that thing is that the Ukrainians are pretty optimistic about their crop, and there definitely could be a competitor here if we're not available to ship things out on the corn side. The interesting twist on the corn, by the way, in the fact that the USDA increased the yield here a little bit higher than the trade was looking for, and even the acreages were pushed up, not modestly there. I think there's 700,000 tons, 600,000 or 700,000 acres, I should say, on corn. But they also increased our feed usage by 75 and our exports by 75. So in reality, the Indian carryover stock at 1.4 still is with a carryover stock ratio of 9.5% is still an interesting level. That's why it's so important is how this corn actual yield finalizes out in the U.S. on the corn. We'll talk about soybeans. I didn't want to make a long dissertation here. The soybeans, actually, a similar situation there with the on the yield edging up a little bit, but the surprise was the fact that the soybean acres were decreased here on soybeans, and that I need to put a lot more data together here to figure out exactly how the USDA came up with that one. But some people were definitely not looking for an increase, even with the corn increasing here late in the season on the planted acreage in that. But in that regard, the exports were kind of modestly changed in old crop, and they did decrease crush, and same thing on new crop side. They decreased the crush side, but they also increased the carryover, increased the export level here up about 35 million. And so that being said, the carryover stock there at 185 million, still a pretty tight little supply situation going forward. And that lots of optimism in South America here about big crops for the 2022 year after last year's so-so situation on corn and soybeans in Argentina, and the same thing on this corn. But wow, the world weather forecasts right now are for building La Nina. That really isn't the best forecast for a South American crop. It doesn't mean it's. We had the same impact on the plantings on beans last fall, and I think that I don't know that's going to be the huge delay as it was this year, but the prospects of the changing temperatures in the Pacific out there. Once you get cool temperatures sitting in there, it does impact the weather trends in South America, and that could negate some of the optimism of, geez, I think they're talking about over 112 or 13 million metric tons of corn for next year in Brazil, and also in beans, they're looking for 144 million. That's going to be some competition, and you're exactly right. We got to keep an eye on what's going on in South America, but right now, at least the weather trends for South America are not as optimistic as they have in certain years of the neutral or even La Nina, or excuse me, an El Nino type of crop year from there. But right now we've got one report that wasn't as negative as the world was looking for. We'll have to see what the next one turns out to be.
It seems that the thing here is that soybeans resist more to weather issues than corn.
Oh, always a tradition of soybeans around the world. They have the great ability to sometimes wait and see if the moisture will come. Even like soybeans, we had the really delayed plantings here this last year in Brazil, and yet ultimately it came in with a higher production number. I think the vulnerable crop continues to be corn on a long-term basis. If you're not as timely about that and you get pushed into later situations where the conditions are traditionally not as good, it does have an impact on what kind of yields we're going to have. And I think the one twist that's kind of hit this year's crop in the US has been, on the corn side particularly, has been the generally above normal temperatures that we experience. They're not been record. We're not talking about hefty type of numbers in the corn in the US on temperatures on a daily basis, but the overnight temperatures, corn likes to rest a little bit at night to store its sugars and things from photosynthesis. If it's sitting there at 70 degrees plus, even if it's coming down from 90, it's better, but they like to be in the mid 60s, even have some numbers down in the 50s there once in a while. We finally had our first 50-degree overnight temperature in Chicago for over 2 months. So that's an interesting stat in my opinion, but we don't grow many bushels of corn in Chicago, but it's a realization of what's going out there in the country as we go along. But as I said before, this next week, we got to look at what's happening in the Gulf and what's happening around the world on weather situations, and we'll see what the market wants to do. We at least found a little bounce going today.
All right, we're going to be checking in. Thank you.
Sounds good. It's always good to be with you.